Okay, so we will be live streaming.
Okay.
I did here. This one. Go about here. This can be your headphones. The volume is under there. Remove this. Remove this out of right here. Yeah, no, you'll go there with those
Okay.
headphones.
All right.
And I'm gonna make sure the camera's up. Have a seat there. I'll go print up the scripts. Would you like me to refill your water?
Yeah, sure. It's
And we're live in a few minutes. So you can, I think, let's see. So we're already live streaming. So everything we say is in
Right.
some way going out.
okay.
So, we're never exactly off time.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Yesterday, we had him on here.
Say again.
Matt says
Oh,
this
okay.
is 2.
Yeah, you're right.
So are you Zach?
No.
No?
Zach is my son. He's not here today. This is James,
James.
one of our interns who also got hired by Salon
Uh-huh.
for being here, as internships are supposed to do.
Okay.
So I'll give you time cues when we get to the first break, but if you ever see this, that means wrap it up.
Okay.
So 10 or 15 seconds, hand it back to me.
Okay.
I'll tell you about other stuff at the break since we're about to come out. Now we have fun. So now this is I get prepared and then have fun.
Good.
So okay, here we go.
Is there a mute button over here?
No,
Okay.
no,
In case I have to clear my throat. Okay.
you just turn away. That's everyone. Welcome to the Peak News. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. You're listening to AM 1460 and FM 101.1. The Answer. Thanks so much for joining us for this grassroots citizens experiment that we're doing here. Who thought that we could take the news source, and turn it back to the people? I did. I, for many years, have thought about that because this is my realm. And really everything in America, it would be great if it was this way around the world, but definitely in America, it's we the people. We're the government. You hear that all the time and you know that. But we're everything. We're education, right? We're faith, right? We're business. It's us. Like, when did we get this thought that it's somebody else, that our lives are in the hand of somebody else? Like, who do you think that is? I mean, it's human beings who we've given power to. And while that is wonderful, when we're all in a cooperative mood, when things start getting divisive, when things start polarizing, when we lose our identity as a nation, well, then what happens? Well, people start taking advantage of other people in big ways. And we need to take it back. And that involves everything. And you've seen that, in government, and especially on the local level in school board. School board elections are coming up. So I believe there's still time to throw your hat in the ring if you want to run. But in media, we've absolutely thought, well, you know what? I can post stuff on social media. I can maybe do a blog or now podcast, which is awesome. But to really get out to the people, there's no way. That's controlled by forces that are bigger than me. Billion-dollar, trillion-dollar institutions, holding companies, entertainment companies, people that are bought and paid for by big money. And you know what? You're right. That is what happened. That is what compromised this. This is why we don't trust media anymore. But folks, how are we going to live like that? Can we go on in our life, in our business, in our family, not trusting information? Like that's untenable. We can't keep going on like that. So we need to replace it. And to me, if it's all about we the people, well, we the people should take it back. And so that's what we're doing here at the Peak. That's what you're doing. If you're getting your voice out there in any way, shape, or form, keep talking. Keep being persuasive. Keep listening. Have an open mind, not so open that your brain falls out. That happens to a lot of people. They're too open-minded. Hold to what you know to be true. Unless someone shows you a better truth, and then be willing to move on with that. But always remember, and this is what we do at the local level, the people in our region, they're our neighbors. Okay, so even if you really, really disagree with them, they're still our neighbors. You're still my neighbor. So I need to care about you, and we need to care about this community together. And that's what we're doing here at the Peak. So go to thepeak.news. If you haven't already find out more about us, become a citizen journalist or an intern if you're a young person. And we have a program going into the D11 school system, going to be training up young people in journalism to be ethically integrous people reporting on our region. Become a sponsor. be a guest. We have all of that on the site. We have contact forms. Reach out to us. So what are we talking about today on The Peak, as it is Government and Politics Tuesday, where we're talking about DEI, CRT, wokeness, radicalism in the American military. And we know that that got infused, has been infused over many, many, many years, especially under the last administration. And now it's being taken out. And we have someone who's been combating against it for quite a long time, Dr. Ron Scott. He's a retired colonel in the U.S. Air Force, and he is now the president and CEO of Stand Together Against Racism and Radicalism in the Services. That acronym is STARS with 2 R's. And we're talking on the program today about combating radical ideology in the American military. Colonel Ron Scott, thanks so much for being on The Peak.
Great. Glad to be here.
Is he up? No, we're not. I'm not hearing him.
Glad to be here.
Oh, there we go. Thanks for being here. I want to make sure that his mic is maybe a little bit higher because I can't hear him in my headphones. Thank you. What do you feel about this topic? How do you feel about DEI, CRT, and wokeness in our schools, in our society? Certainly, there's an argument for it, and there are things in it that we should, as a society, be representing. But what it's become, how it has actually interfered with our rights, with our free speech, is potentially a very dangerous thing, especially readiness in the military. And so that's what we're dealing with on The Peak today. Hi, I'm Goldman the Watchman, and we'll be right back. Are we good on that?
Is that better?
I want to make sure with him. It wasn't that I was hearing the live stream. I didn't hear him when he spoke. So we definitely have this mic up, and maybe he just needed to be closer. I mean, if you tap his mic.
Switch over here. That's all the way to the left.
No, that's your volume for there. Just tap that.
Should I turn this to the right?
No, that doesn't matter. That's just for your headphones.
I'll turn them all the way up in here, and then that might help.
But it's weird. I mean, we just used it yesterday. Well, I don't want to have an open mic that we're not using. That'll just lead to echo. Okay, let's do a sound check back in there and just make sure he's up on your side. Can you and get on top, get on close to the mic, just
Test,
like 2
1, 2,
inches up.
3.
Keep going.
Test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
It sounded really hollow to me. It's
9,
like not.
10.
I'm hearing it, but it's not normal.
Test 1, 2, 3.
We'll just switch to the other one.
What?
We'll just switch to the other one.
The other mic. Okay. Okay, so that'll be 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
You turn 3 off.
Yeah. And when it's time for Jim, it'll be 4 and 5.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, let's try it again.
Test 1, 2, 3.
One sec.
Okay.
Okay.
Test 1, 2,
Yeah,
3.
that's much better. There's something wrong with that other mic since yesterday, because yesterday was fine.
Yeah, I could hear myself too. So
Yeah. I mean, you didn't so much before. Yeah, there's something going on with that mic or the input or something. This is nice and clean now. Okay. Thanks, James. Okay, so we're on page 2. So we're going to start with the Iran-Israel conflict, go to the Carmen line, and if we have more time, which one? Security at the Air Force Base or...
yeah, your call, whichever.
Well, which one do you like? Or purchase of ranch land?
Probably the security one.
Okay. Okay. So we got about a minute. So let me tell you just a little clue in on radio.
Yeah.
So radio is really sort of voyeuristic, like listening into a conversation at a coffee shop or whatever. So
Right.
people are, it's, people bantering and good information. So we want to keep that in mind.
Good.
As far as it's just voice. So body language, facial expressions don't make it out of the booth. So that's
Yeah.
why we tend to talk a little over the top
Okay.
because it gets shrunk down. If
Ah.
you do normal, it sounds a little sleepy.
Okay.
So more, not volume, but intensity.
Okay.
Like, and the faster you speak, obviously, the more you can say in
Got it.
our limited time.
Okay.
If you can vocalize emotions, because like radio theater, you know, smiling or
Yeah.
anger, you know,
Yeah.
because or else it stays in the booth. So that just helps make it more dynamic.
You bet.
And otherwise, I told you about wrap it up.
Right.
At the next break, I'll tell you about time cues for the for your monologue.
Got it.
But
Okay.
but otherwise, just and if you hear music, that's the same thing as wrap it up. I need it back
Got it.
because that's 30 seconds. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Here we go. Headline segment.
Right.
Welcome back to the Peak News. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. You're listening to AM 1460 and FM 101.1. The Answer, it's Government and Politics Day, and we're talking about radical ideologies in the military. We have as our guest and co-host for the hour, Dr. Ron Scott, retired Air Force colonel and now president and CEO of the organization Stand Together Against Racism and Radicalism in the Services. That deals with this, combats radical ideology. This is our headline segment, and so we're bringing in, since we have a former Air Force colonel and someone who's been in the military a very long time and military associated for a very long time, I'm going to talk about how different news items are impacting us locally from a military standpoint. So, of course, the number one news item in the world today is the Iran-Israel conflict. We did an entire program on it yesterday. I invite you to check it out. It's on our Facebook Live, and we're doing a Facebook Live now at Facebook. We're the Peak News Media on Facebook, so you can always check us out and even see us at the breaks. We had Mohammed Faridi on yesterday. He is the director of Iranian Christians International, and we were talking about it from an Iranian perspective. He's a former Iranian Revolutionary Guard jihadist, who now is very much excited about what's going on there, because the resistance in Iran will hopefully rise up and take their country back after almost 50 years. But more importantly for our area is, how does this impact our region with what's going on over there? Israel is continuing the attacks. Their goal is obviously to defend themselves and to cause Iran to not be a threat anymore. And that may very well have to involve, if we're going to take out the really, sorry, I say we, I caught myself saying that. Why is that? I'm a dual Israeli citizen. I'm also Jewish. So when I talk about Israel, I do that. But let me step back as a reporter. Was Israel the need to take out the really deep centrifuges and such may require, most likely will require, bunker buster bombs that are 30,000 pounds. Only the B-52s can bring them. Israel doesn't have those, or some kind of special forces. So it's looking like, to get rid of that, the United States will have to get involved in some way, not in the war, but in an operation specifically to take out these deep nuclear facilities. And it's looking like the Security Council, it seems, met just within a couple of hours, and that this may be where things are going. So, Colonel Scott, what is your impression of this? Some people are saying this is a World War III scenario, and that Israel may drag America into a war. What is your take as a military man and an Air Force colonel?
I think there's probably more fear right now than reality would support. The media reports are very ambiguous right now. We have really little understanding precisely of what is actually happening. In other words, there were Israeli forces on the ground in Iran that were helping to direct munition strikes. To get that kind of access requires pretty sophisticated activities. The bunker buster that you're talking about, we had that back during the Persian Gulf War. And some of these munitions were actually delivered out of the backside of a C-130 on pallets. Okay. But what happens, they strap precision equipment to be able to guide some of this stuff to be precise in the target it's hitting. And so we've got the technology. It's just a matter of to what extent we commit resources to deploy this kind of weapon.
Do you see the U.S. military getting involved, beyond operations like that?
I would be reluctant to suggest that we're at that point. Israel has enough of its own assets. They'll get support from the United States, technical support, without involving any U.S. forces at this time.
And what about people who feel this may start a regional conflict that might turn into a world conflict? As people say, World War III is this, the beginning of Gog Magog and the whole, end of the age kind of scenarios. Because certainly it looks, that things would come out of that region eventually. Do you see the timing of that with this current operation?
Well, memories are pretty short. People forget President Trump was in the Middle East on a tour where he received a tremendous welcome by Arabic nations, recognizing the potential we have to build partnerships and alliances with the United States that are not based on religion, that sort of thing, but more economic values that we have in common. So President Trump was already prepping the battlefield for that region.
Mm-hmm.
And so things were going on in Israel at that time, obviously the Gaza Strip. People forget.
Things are always going on in Israel. It's a nonstop conflict, unfortunately.
And people forget, for decades now, we've been dealing with Hamas, Hezbollah,
Mm-hmm.
and the Houthis.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, we had ISIS and Al-Qaeda. It's personal for me. I was with a think tank called Applied Research Associates, working nuclear counterterrorism. So we were pretty read into what was happening in that part of the world and the threat that it posed to the United States. So we're actually a long way away from World War III in this particular scenario.
It seems like no one wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon on the planet. So I think everybody's happy, although they won't admit it. And as an Israeli citizen, I'm proud that there's one country that was willing to do it, because it seems like this should have happened in some capacity a long time ago.
And they haven't been shy. I mean, America's the great Satan, according to the theocratic leadership in Iran. So it's a very radical situation. And fortunately, President Trump has the realistic approach to addressing this right now. I completely support him and Secretary Hegseth.
And if you listen to yesterday's show, which I recommend you do, we talked about potential for terrorism here from Mohammed Faridi, who, he was part of this. Iran is getting very desperate. They don't have much that they can do other than activate individuals or groups around the world. And so the terrorism threat in America should be taken very seriously, because they have put people all over the world and in this country.
Very much so. And we have an advisor named Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He's been part of STARS from day one. Zuhdi is a practicing Muslim, but he's pushing for Muslim reform in America. And your listeners see him on Fox News, Newsmax a lot. He's pushing this concept called the red-green axis, this unholy alliance between Marxists and jihadists. And so we're aware of that, and we're imposing measures to take care of it.
Okay, one more story. Today is the final day, if you're a Colorado Springs resident, to vote on this Carmen Line annexation. We did a show a couple weeks ago. You can see it on our Facebook page, a civil discussion between two primaries on the sides of the issue. Maybe you voted yet, maybe you haven't. But one of the arguments is regarding Schriever Air Force, Space Force Base, and have the close proximity and possibly compromising the mission of the base. Different people have been commenting on this. What is your take on it? We have about a minute. What is your take on this annexation? What's your opinion?
Wow, it's a matter of sorting out the stakeholders, the developers who stand to make a lot of money, the political capital, our elected officials, to be able to talk about this kind of growth and the revenue that it generates. But you have other stakeholders, people that live in that community, who now all of a sudden see their environment disrupted, greater traffic congestion, whatever. So it's an awkward situation. There's pros and cons on both sides.
As an Air Force colonel, do you see it potentially having 6,500 homes out there, in a way interfering with what goes on in the operations of the base?
Not really. operations. I see it interfering more with the economic stability here in the area.
What do you mean by that?
Well, there's in terms of externalities, you've got positive and negative from economic using economic language. There are those that stand to benefit. The developers will make a fortune, but others, the people that already live in that area, now all of a sudden the congestion, increased traffic, those that have views, landscape, those are negative externalities.
Okay, but from a military standpoint, you don't see it positive or negative.
No
Okay.
impact.
Okay, I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. We have as our guest Dr. Ron Scott, retired USAF Colonel, and now President and CEO of Stand Together Against Racism and Radicalism in the Services. When we come back, Colonel Scott is going to be talking about the American Creed. You're listening to The Peak. We'll be right back. Good. Okay, cool.
Good.
Yes,
Okay.
very good. So in this next one, after I introduce you, you'll have about 4 minutes of a monologue. So just keep up the energy, flow through it. I will give you 3, 2, 1, and this means 30 seconds rather than a wrap-ups, because
Got it.
30 gives you time to finish and, put a
Okay.
final chapter on it.
Good.
So while you see the cues, just start pacing yourself and figuring out how you get through your main points and make sure you cover them on there. Otherwise, if later on at any point, if I hold up one thing, I'm not telling you to stop. I'm giving you like a 1 minute budget
Okay.
to keep going. Again, if you hear music, that's the warning track. I got to have
Okay.
it back. And if you run short on this segment, I'll ask you a follow-up question, but
Okay.
try to fill
Sure.
the space if you can, but if not, don't worry.
I read it 4.5 minutes earlier.
Okay. Well, then cruise through it.
Okay.
So I'll try
Now,
to get.
will this be video?
It's being videoed right now. So and going out on it's going out on Facebook
Good.
now. So you'll have it. So it takes you 4.5 minutes. Okay. So
Yep.
I'll sometimes I take a minute for the intro, but
Right.
I'll get out quicker so you have your time. But
Right. And I am going to try to be inject emotion or whatever.
yeah, that's the thing. You gotta
And-
move at a good clip, but you also don't want it to come off like you're reading or you're flat.
Right.
So try to do that. What we generally do in radio is we just speed the whole thing up.
Got it.
So people get used to hearing that slightly faster speed, not like an auction, but a little bit faster.
Right.
And that way your pauses are a little bit, you can still take the pauses, but they're a little bit shorter. And when you're moving at a slightly faster clip, you can still make those pauses and have that emotion, but just everything's sped up.
Got it.
And that's how we
Okay.
that's
now
how we do 30-second commercials and things like that.
And I do have some quotes that I'm going to actually read. So,
Okay.
so
So yeah, pause and change up your. I mean, you know how to read
Sure.
so it sounds like you're, those sound like you're reading. So
Right.
these are all the vocal conventions we learn, doing radio. So
great.
So.
All right. Yeah.
Okay. So we're back in about a minute. So if you want to review your notes or anything, be a good time. Okay. It goes by quick. It goes by quick. And every segment, we're communicating in a different way, in a different modality. So it makes the show dynamic. Most people don't realize that. But every segment is a different communication style.
Sure.
So,
Good.
yeah. So it's challenging for the guests, but it also allows them to do more than a standard interview,
Yeah.
which we like. So
Good. Well, keeps it more dynamic that way. And
it does. But yet we keep continuity of a topic overall, but we're sort of covering it from a lot of different angles.
got it.
So,
Okay.
okay, here we go. Welcome back to the Peak News. You're listening on AM 1460. The Answer across the Pikes Peak region. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. And no, we don't lie to you around here. Our goal is to bring you facts in context, and you determine what's true. You determine what's important to you. That's what the media is supposed to be. That's what we're trying to do, is give it back to you. Check us out at thepeak.news for our podcasts and how to get involved. And this really is a local citizen journalism project. Well, we have with us today on Government and Politics Tuesday, Dr. Ron Scott, a retired Air Force colonel, president and CEO of STARS, Stand Together Against Racism and Radicalism in the Services. And Colonel Scott is now talking about the American Creed. Colonel Scott.
Great, thanks. Let me start with a quote here. Socialism is precisely the religion that must overwhelm Christianity. In the new order, socialism will triumph by first capturing the culture via infiltration of schools, universities, churches, and the media by transforming the consciousness of society. That was 1915, Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci. Now, 3 years later, in America, you had William Tyler Page, who wrote the American Creed, and it was adopted by the U.S. House of Representatives in 1918. I want to share that. I believe in the United States of America as a government of the people, by the people, for the people, whose just powers are derived from the consent of the governed, a democracy and a republic, a sovereign nation of many sovereign states, a perfect union, one and inseparable, established upon the principles of freedom, equality, justice, and humanity, for which American patriots sacrifice their lives and fortunes. I therefore believe it is my duty to my country to love it, to support its Constitution, to obey its laws, and to respect the flag and to defend it against all enemies. That was the American Creed. Now, unfortunately, the American Creed inspired and encouraged Americans to defeat tyranny in the 20th century, the First and Second World Wars. But the radicalism that fueled the atrocities there is alive today in America in the form of critical race theory and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let me provide some evidence. In the fall of 2008, the Black Congressional Caucus chartered without any debate the Military Leadership Diversity Commission in the fiscal year 2009 National Defense Authorization Act. Now, the justification for this was supposedly racism. They explained in issue paper number 9, and this is all in the public domain, that minorities were overrepresented within the enlisted ranks, but underrepresented within the flag officer ranks, generals and admirals. So in their final report, published in March of 2011, they were explicit about what they were doing. On page 18 of the report, the commissioners explained that in order to promote diversity, i.e. racial, ethnic, gender, you name it, they had to discriminate to achieve equity. And this is especially among the flag officer ranks. They also said that assimilation was bad, that it subordinated subcultural differences. This is what they justified as the word inclusion, to bring these minorities that were underrepresented within the general officer ranks. So now recall in the Gramsci quote, he talked about the need to transform the consciousness of society. The commissioners were explicit in explaining that DEI was about being diversity conscious. That is racial, ethnic, gender, sexual orientation, whatever, contrary to the Reverend Martin Luther King's colorblind concept. Now, this took place in 2011. 5 months later, the president issued an executive order establishing diversity and inclusion personnel programs across the entire federal government. That was in 2011. Today, it's proliferated among corporations, K through 12, universities, media, you name it. So in the final analysis, Gramsci would be very pleased.
You're listening to Dr. Ron Scott, retired U.S. Air Force colonel, talking about the American Creed versus, well, what we would call radicalism, what we would call woke, what we would call really socialism and Marxism. And you hear us talking about that on the program a lot. It has infused its way into everything in our culture. You have a right to agree with it as an American, but we need to bring it to the surface, and we need to discuss this, especially how it's been integrated into our institutions. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. We'll be right back with Colonel Scott. Good deal. Good timing.
So
Okay.
was it what, right at about 4 minutes or?
Yeah. That was real good. A little bit over.
Yeah.
Okay, we're on segment 4, page 4. So you can review the questions there. This is a 12-minute segment. You'll have about 2 to 2.5 minutes per answer, and I'll give you time cues during it. Mostly wrap it up if I need to, so that we can make sure we get to all 4 points here.
Great.
Was it good? It's flowing?
Yep.
Feeling good?
Good.
Your reading doesn't sound like you're reading. You do it very
Good.
well.
Good.
Yeah. You did that. I couldn't tell. That's a really good skill. It's a very good skill to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we give a lot of presentations.
Yeah.
So
but you hear, Donald Trump hasn't figured out how to read a teleprompter without sounding like he's reading.
I know.
After all his experience,
Yeah.
he still sounds like he's reading. He
Yeah.
just doesn't.
Which is what Obama, that was a strength.
Oh,
So
yeah. Okay. So back in 45 seconds. Okay. Welcome back to The Peak on Government and Politics Tuesday. We're talking about radicalism in the form of DEI, CRT, woke ideology in the American military. And we have Dr. Ron Scott, retired U.S. Air Force Colonel, with us. Before we get back to Colonel Scott, I want to do a shout out to one of our sponsors, our gold sponsor, John Graham Homes. John is, I often go to say, a former Marine, but I'm told there's no such thing as a former Marine. They're just a Marine, but he's not active duty anymore. He is a realtor, John Graham Homes, and he is the Heroes Home Advantage real estate representative with a rebate program going out to our hometown heroes, those who are military, first responders, police. And so John works specifically with them and gives special discounts. He's really committed to giving back to our community, and especially those who served like he did. So check out John Graham Homes if it's time to buy or sell your house. Thanks, John. So government and politics in our area. Are you involved? How can you get involved? Well, you can run for office for sure, but there's a small percentage of people who run for office, but there's so many ways to be involved. Supporting candidates as we're coming up to school board elections, donating to candidates, going to meetings, school board meetings, talking to your neighbors, writing, because it is our country. It's supposed to be our country. And so, we say, there's just a small percentage of people that actually get involved, but 100% of the people complain. And we need to change that. And someone who's doing something about this bringing of the negative sides of DEI, CRT, woke ideology into the military is Dr. Ron Scott. And he is the president and CEO of Stand Together Against Racism and Radicalism in the Services, which the acronym is STARS with 2 R's. So, Colonel Scott, why, way back, did you originally join the military? And then how eventually did you become the head of this organization, STARS?
that's a great question, Chaim. Oftentimes I feel like Forrest Gump. It's part of history. So in 1969, I entered the Air Force Academy. And I'll be honest, I entered because it was tuition free. It was a full ride scholarship. And I knew Vietnam was going on and I'd probably be drafted.
Where were you from?
From here, Denver.
Oh, okay.
Right. And so 4 years at the academy, but I met some wonderful people who were devoted to serving their nation, not just to get an education. And I spent 30 years on active duty, flying airplanes throughout the world. I was in Germany during the height of the Cold War. I ran the Air Force Operations Center, so I was read into all the stuff that's going on in the world. That's why I'm a little bit more reserved and saying we're, approaching World War III. Things sometimes seem a lot worse than they really are. And so I taught at a university. I was a think tank working nuclear counterterrorism. And so it was 7 July of 2020. The Air Force Academy football coaches put out a video chanting Black Lives Matter 7 times. And I understood that George Floyd had just happened. And these coaches, all decent men, fathers, husbands, and coaches. And I think they were somewhat sympathetic to what was happening, but did not quite realize that the Black Lives Matter movement is a Marxist-based effort. And so that alarmed me. And so when I looked at that, I'm thinking, how could people like this be so easily duped by this? What's wrong with diversity? What's wrong with inclusion? And then when you finally take the time to research it, you find out that the justification for it is critical theory, critical legal theory, critical race theory. And it was spawned in the United States from German scholars that escaped Germany when Hitler came to power to come to the United States and set up the Frankfurt School at Columbia University. There's when they started pushing critical theory. It was a version of Marxism.
So for people who don't know, can you give us a brief, 30 seconds on what is critical theory?
Marxism was economic, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. It was class warfare, economic class warfare. These Marxists in the Frankfurt School realized that wouldn't work in America because of our large middle class. So they changed the warfare to political identity groups, race, ethnic, LGBTQ, you name it. And so they could force,
which didn't exist, most of which didn't exist at the time.
So they could force division within America. But the whole idea was to divide Americans. And so it matured in the 1960s. And now the 2008 cycle with the Black Lives Matter movement, or in 2020, just put it on steroids. And so that's what got our attention. And so we formed this group, STARS, to educate people, not indoctrinate them, educate them on what we're dealing with, and we can do something about it.
And when was this founded? The STARS?
7 July was the conception of 2020, and it was April of 2021 when we received our IRS 501c3 status.
And this is specifically to deal with it within the military?
Yes.
Okay.
But there is a nexus in terms of the broader society. For instance, K through 12 indoctrinate our young people that come into the enlisted ranks. So they come into the military already indoctrinated.
Okay. So what do you perceive, having had this military career, colonel, Cold War experience, and now dealing with more ideology than, as the enemy, what do you perceive as the greatest threat to America at this point?
The domestic enemy being a radical ideology that is so seductive.
More than China, more than the Soviet Union.
Exactly, because they exploit it. They exploit it in so many different ways. The Confucius educated people in America are being indoctrinated by Mao. And Mao in the 1960s was part of this. The Weather Underground, the Students for Democratic Society, all this stuff had a nexus. It was connected in terms of this radical thinking, which is very anti-America when you define it by the American creed.
So how do you see it manifesting now, and why do you think it's so dangerous?
A lot of these folks have gone underground. President Trump has issued executive orders to cease and desist diversity and inclusion. And so we see a lot of organizations where you had a chief diversity officer is still in the same organization, but now he has a different title as the chief cultural officer or whatever. They still have the ideology in their DNA, in their soul. And they're going to find ways of promoting and advancing the notion of systemic racism and whatever in America, even though it's not the case.
It's amazing. It gets pushed by a black president, Obama. It has been we have a black mayor here who's just been in the country under a decade. You would think people would look at that as the reality that we don't have this in our society. Why do you think it keeps bubbling up so much? It's just because it's propagated by organizations that have something that they want to accomplish?
That, and Gramsci was right. Socialism is a religion. Marxist socialism is a religion. I mean, it becomes very moralistic. And if you don't see it the way they do, not only are you wrong, but you are immoral, and you should be punished for it. And we see that. Our general counsel right now has 150 clients, and it seems to grow by 2 to 5 every day. These were individuals whose careers were destroyed because they didn't buy into this DEI. They didn't want to go to the mandatory sessions and that kind of stuff. And so they gave them bad performance reports. They struck them from schools, promotion, whatever.
So, why within the military do you feel that this is not something that can be part of our military? These programs.
Culturally, the people in the military are there to serve. They obey orders, legal orders. And so like that COVID vaccine mandate was illegally implemented. And we drove 8,000 people out of active duty with general discharge conditions. And I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more here a bit later. But that's an example of the radicalism. You better obey or we will punish you.
So what can we do about it? How do we solve this as a nation?
First of all, like alcoholics, is to recognize I have a problem. And that's to understand the nature of the problem, then we can do something about it. And so right now we're in an educational campaign. We're giving presentations across the nation with the title, The American Creed Threatened by Radical Ideology or Radical Indoctrination. And we're getting a very warm and positive reception.
So you feel are you working to specifically get these programs as stars out of the military, or you're also talking about getting back, to children, to everyone? Because once you buy into this, it is hard to shake.
Correct. We're focused primarily on the military, but as I mentioned, there's a nexus. All of our enlisted people come through the K-12 public education system. And a lot of our officers that go through ROTC or Officer Candidate School go through universities that are pushing DEI programs.
So what is it that you teach in order to give people, an understanding, an option to think differently?
To refresh in their minds the American Creed and what that means in terms of our founding documents, the Declaration, Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and then to introduce them to this critical race theory ideology, where it came about, what its intentions are, how it's deployed through this diversity, equity, and inclusion program. We have thousands of people that are diversity and inclusion officers, highly paid, and we call them grifters.
So, Francis Schaeffer many years ago talked about how this was infiltrating the church. And I think overall is understanding you can't have both socialism, Marxism, and Christianity. You can't have both socialism, Marxism, and the American creed.
Correct.
These things are mutually exclusive, but when they're tried to combined, it ends up crashing and burning in some way. Yeah. So we have less than a minute left. Quickly, how can people get involved with STARS?
Well, our website is world class. It's really more of an analytical repository.
And that's STARS with 2 R's. So
Correct.
STARRS.US. It's
Correct.
.US.
And you can donate, you can volunteer. Every day we have people sharing their stories with us, and we refer them to our legal team to do something to help them. And it's pro bono. We're all doing this with our free time.
Okay, so everybody there is a volunteer.
Yes.
Okay, but people can donate?
Yes, very much so.
Where do you get money from other sources, institutional sources, or
Not right now. It's private.
It's all private
Right.
funding. Okay, you've been listening to retired Air Force Colonel Ron Scott talking about the organization STARS. Again, the website is STARRS.US. When we come back with Colonel Scott, we're going to be talking about the impact that COVID vaccine mandates had and are still having on our military. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. You're listening to The Peak. We will be right back.
Good.
Good. We covered it. It
Good.
bounced around a little bit, but we
Yeah.
got it back.
Sorry,
That's
I
my
jumped-
job. No, that's fine. That's my job. That's why we talk about it ahead of time, so I can always make sure that
I jumped the gun, but I got more to
Yeah, that's
say
fine.
on the COVID thing.
That's normal, but because I know where we want to go, we can always figure a way to come back. So
Good.
that's why every interview it's like, okay, so we have. Oh, he's going to come tell me about the rant here. Okay, so
234.
234, and it's on what? Home Rule Authority, specifically in Colorado Springs?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, James.
Boy, great quote by Jefferson. Great quote by Jefferson.
Oh, okay. Yes. So, okay, so on this one, I have to throw to a pre-recorded segment, so there won't be music, and so when it's time to wrap up, we'll have to be out of there,
Okay.
quick. But
Okay.
so I very often we can break this up into two things, more like what has the impact been? What can we do now? I mean, you have things that we can do
Sure.
now for people. We're bringing people back or
Sure.
offering them any compensation. Are they getting back pay or things like that for being
Not yet.
dismissed?
No, we're pushing for it. We wrote a letter to the president earlier this month.
Mhm.
It was signed by 7 key individuals, to include a former Surgeon General of the Air Force.
Okay.
And we sent a letter to the Secretary for Health and Human Services to bring on to the CDC committee Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long. She's a whistleblower
Okay.
and revealed that there were people that were corrupting the medical database. There were spikes in medical conditions or whatever, and she was alerting people.
She's a military doctor
Yeah,
who was a whistleblower, even though
Yep.
her commanding
Yep.
officer said, okay, she spoke up at Truth and Liberty a couple of months ago. She
Right.
was one of the keynotes.
Yeah,
up there.
we're
I
working
saw her.
with her.
She was fantastic.
Yeah.
Saw her speak.
Very, very courageous.
Yeah. For
So she asked Hegseth to extend her retirement so she could help, and he did.
Oh.
But right now she's kind of in a holding pattern to figure out how Hegseth wants to put her to work.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. So again, this is a little under 5-minute
Okay.
segment. So we'll have about 4 minutes to talk on it. So I'll ask you what has been the impact and then now what can be done.
Good. Good.
Welcome back to the Peak News on Government and Politics Tuesday, as we are discussing radical ideology in the military with our guest, Dr. Ron Scott, former U.S. Air Force colonel and now president and CEO of Stand Together Against Racism and Radicalism in the Services. And in this final segment, we're going to be talking about the COVID mandates that, of course, put an incredible amount of pressure during the military, because in the military, I'm told, you get a lot of vaccines and you, of course, do what you're told. But when it came to this, there were many that protested and they were ostracized. And so, Colonel Scott, tell us what has been the impact, what's your take on the impact of these COVID vaccines on the American military?
The biggest impact in my mind is the loss of trust. What our administration did in terms of illegally implementing this mandate. For instance, the Pfizer was never fully licensed. There was a version called Comirnaty that was fully licensed, but it was not available in the United States for distribution. So our troops were being forced to take this experimental version of the vaccine, which is illegal.
As were so many around the country under emergency youth authorization.
Exactly. And so they would not grant religious exemptions, even to chaplains. And we have an affidavit where the Secretary of the Air Force, in a closed session with general officers, said there will be no religious exemptions granted in this vaccine. In other words, you will take it, or if you don't, you'll be punished. And so they ended up forcefully discharging over 8,000 active duty troops who chose to exercise their First Amendment rights to not take an experimental vaccine.
Now, did this all happen under the Biden administration, or did it
Yes.
start under Trump because the vaccine was developed under
That's a
Trump?
great question. Trump tried to accelerate the trials and whatever for the vaccine to get it out. He was taking the advice of his scientific folks,
Mhm.
Fauci and other folks. But it was under the Biden administration when we saw the lock-ins and the mandates to issue this vaccine to people whether they wanted it or not. And so the real number is probably closer to 80,000. Because now when you factor in the reservists and the guardsmen and whatever that were also affected by this, many of them voluntarily left.
So you're saying 80,000 troops overall left over this.
Correct. And that's from Lieutenant General Michael Flynn.
So what can be done now? I know it's a different administration. They're being invited back. What's going on regarding, apologies or compensations? on that?
That's a great question. Earlier this month, we sent a letter to the President of the United States asking for him to grant pardons and amnesty for
This
all
is
the,
from STARS, from your organization?
from STARS. And it had 7 signatories of people. We're talking general officers that indicated to the president that the boards for correction and military records that were set up to really kind of work this thing were too slow and inefficient. They couldn't keep up with the volume. So we were suggesting that he grant amnesties and pardons, and then from there pursue justice for actions that were taken. For instance, we had a lot of commanders illegally mandate this. And so they should be held accountable in our opinion, but that's secondary. We're focused right now on remedies for those that were adversely affected.
And do you feel that this affected our readiness?
Very much so. Yeah, we were short thousands of people. We're over 1,000 pilots short right now for active duty.
Still.
But when President Trump and Hegseth became leaders in our government, recruiting went up sky high. So our troops trust them, but they didn't trust the previous administration.
Real quick, 30 seconds. What do you do as a soldier when you have this moral problem, but you're supposed to follow orders? What do you do? I mean, you're a colonel.
That's where colonels need to exercise the courage to do the right thing and to explain to your bosses, it's inappropriate for me to mandate and put pressure on my people to take this shot.
Okay. Thank you, Colonel Scott, for being here on the Peak today and discussing these really important issues regarding our military.
Yeah. Thank you, Chaim.
And the website, once again, is stars.us, STARRUS. What do you think on this? Well, that's up to you. Make up your mind, but get involved and speak out whenever you see things going wrong. Now, as he does, Jim Miller, just a guy, he's talking about home rule authority in the Springs.
Just the guy, and this is the Peak Reds. anyways, looks like the city council in Colorado Springs actually, for once, did not limp wrist or knee bend on what? Anything old Governor Polis sausage. That's right, Jerry Poley pulled some garbage going, some kind of housing crap. Look, every time they do any of this stuff with more housing, affordable housing, it's always some trash that does what? It takes more of our money, more of us hardworking, overworked, overtaxed people's money somehow. And they go, it's better for you. We took more of your money, which means they take and waste more of your money. They don't value your time. It's just money's just a token for your time that you sell. And it'll make it more affordable housing for you some way. The city council opposed old Jerry Poley's nonsense. Governor Polisauce, you're going to have to suck on one for that. Look at that. I am surprised. That the city council did not limp wrist and knee bend, because usually the city doesn't remember that it has a home rule authority. We don't have to do what the state says. We can actually rationally do things like human beings, like a community, like a city that actually cares about its citizens, about the people that voted them into positions, right? How's about that? So here's what the state says, though. The state says, and get this, that it could cost us a bunch of funding in the city, a bunch of state funding in the city. What's interesting to me about this is, doesn't it old Jerry Poley to always say a bunch of some crap every time the old trumpeter does this stuff, right? Trumpeter's like, you're not going to get no federal funding in the state because of XYZ, all this sanctuary crap, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And then what's old Governor Polis sausage? What does Jerry Poley say on that? Jerry Poley goes, how could he do that? That's federal funding that we should have, blah, blah, blah. But he's going to pull the same thing to the city that doesn't want to follow his nonsensical housing little bill that he signed into law? Sounds like a hypocrite, right? Not a hippopotamus, a hypocrite. But imagine that from some kind of overpowered, very, very wealthy, well-off beyond all means politician that's just the same old crap with a different face. Yep, Jerry Poley, what a turd in a suit. Remember, if you want it better, be better. I'm Jim Miller. I'm just a guy. This is the Peak Rants on AM 1460 and FM 101.1. The Answer. We'll be right back.
Yeah, we just do a close.
Okay. So yeah, I just have to do a quick close and then we're done. And I'll walk you out where I can. Oh, I need to. Thursday's show. We're having a Juneteenth person on Thursday who's she's the president of the Pikes Peak Diversity Council. So we represent, we let people speak, represent yourself, but it's a good balance to people that. Mhm.
That's why we don't demonize people that promote this kind of stuff. We just disagree with them.
Right.
So
We were just down at the Pikes Peak Pride talking to people, and the Social Democrats have a booth. The Church of Satan has a booth. So I always end up talking with, like, why are you part of this? Okay. Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of The Peak. If you don't think that we represent all sides of things, we are, I'll admit, I'm center right is where I think that the news should be. I believe in, but it shouldn't be liberal news. It shouldn't be right wing. It shouldn't be conservative news. It should just be news. And so the more, that you think that we should be different, join us here at The Peak. Do that. Come down. As long as you're willing to be a journalist, I don't care what your personal ideology is. If you can do your job, you can do real journalism. You can have an opinion. Journalists should have an opinion. It just shouldn't be hidden there. And by the way, for those of you that think I am a small government conservative, but I'm a leave me alone libertarian. I'm a small government guy, not a Republican or a Democrat. So tomorrow on The Peak is Faith and Family Wednesday, and we're really, really happy to have Rabbi Boaz Vituk, who is the chief rabbi at the Chabad here in Colorado Springs. And we're going to be talking about the Jewish community, as well as Israel and anti-Semitism that's going on in this country and a lot of stuff. Wanted to have a member of the Jewish community on here for quite a while. So very happy about that. And to show you that we cover all different things here on Education and Media Thursday, we are covering Juneteenth, and we have as our guest the president of the Pikes Peak Diversity Council, Shirley Martinez, who's a military veteran, and we're going to be talking about the Juneteenth celebration. What is it about? Has it been co-opted? We're going to ask good questions about this because just like everything, there's positive things to it, and then, well, maybe not so good. So tune in for that on Thursday. Coming up next here on The Answer is the Larry Elder Show, so stick around for that and check out our 250-plus podcast at thepeak.news. You're sure to find something that is interesting and inspirational for you. The Peak, we say the quiet stuff out loud, and with you as a fan and participating, we're saying it louder and louder every day for such a time as this. Shalom.